I'd like to think with you today on the issue which forms the basis of our Parashat. Lech, Lecha, get you out, go. The journey commenced in an urgent call to leave the land of Abraham's birth and the family which had been his refuge. The urgency was only extenuated by the fact that Terach, Abraham's father, had delayed the departure by settling in Haran. Interestingly enough, the word Haran appears 3 times in the final verses of the previous Sedra. Once it is spelled Haran, which is the name of Lot's father, and twice Haran, the city in which Terach settled. We read in the last verse of the previous Sedra that Terach died in Haran. These are not Hebrew words, but their meanings are interesting. Haran means high place, whereas Haran means enlightenment. This gives us an indication of what type of place Haran was. It was a center of occultic worship, a place dedicated to the moon god who was dominant in the area at that time and who eventually metamorphed into the god of Islam. The story is told that Haran, the brother of Avraham, was deeply involved in the cult of the moon, in which fire was used. There was a confrontation between him and Avraham, and fire fell from heaven, but did not hurt Avraham. Instead, Haran died. Whatever the truth or otherwise of the story, immediately Terach died, Hashem spoke sharply to Avraham, "You, get out, go." As we began to explore last week, this is the start of a new phase in the war between Hashem and the adversary. The war began in Gan Eden, and in fact, it will end there too. It began with idol worship, the worship of self. And idolatry has been the issue between Hashem, the God of heaven, and humanity ever since. In Bereshit Rabbah 46, Rav Pinchas said, in the name of Rav Hoshea the Great, that the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Avraham, "Go and pave a path for your descendants." You find that everything that is written concerning Avraham is also written about his descendants. When we consider the story of Avraham and the story of Israel in the Torah, we understand that Rav Hoshea is correct. In other words, the narrative of Abraham's life is the narrative of our lives too. We are here to fulfill a common purpose, the foundation and pattern of which was laid in Avraham Avinu, Avraham our father. Thus Hashem says in Bereshit 18, verse 19, "For I know him," that is Avraham, that he will command his children and his household after him, that they should observe the way of God to perform righteousness and justice. This is the faith of Avraham. When the followers of Mashiach Yeshua, especially Rabbi Shaul, wrote of the faith of Avraham, they were not writing about some hidden faith which only he and the followers of Mashiach Yeshua knew about. There are not two Judaisms. There is not us and the rest of our people. That is the absurd position which the theologians of Christianity have adopted. Oh, they say, if only we had had the understanding to see that the Torah was sufficient only until Yeshua came, we would have understood their good news. That it was gone. Let us be clear. The Torah is the good news. The renewal of the good news is that it has the power to transform our lives, because the living Torah came and ratified the renewal of the Torah in our hearts. I hear people calling the writings of the Mashiach's Talmudim, disciples, followers, the Brit Chadashah. We used to, many years ago, use that term ourselves. It's a term which is fondly repeated in Christian and Messianic circles. But the writings of Yeshua's followers are not. They are not the Brit Chadashah. We may at the moment refer to them as the Messianic writings. I also have difficulties with that terminology, but that's a theological matter for another time. But they are not the Brit Chadashah. The Brit Chadashah is a term used only in Yirmiyahu and 9 times in the translations of the Messianic writings. And those 9 times are references to its use in Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah 31. Although on some occasions we might argue that the translation is inappropriate. Yirmiyahu 31 says, "Here, the days are coming, says Hashem, when I will make a Brit Chadashah, a new covenant, with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehudah. Moreover, lest any should wonder what difference it makes, whether this is a collection of future literature he's referring to or not. Hashem helpfully tells us what this Brit Chadashah is. For this is the covenant, this is the Brit I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Hashem. I will put my Torah within them and write it on their hearts. I will be their God and they will be my people. That's good news. That is the Beit Hadashah, the renewed covenant. That and nothing else is the Beit Hadashah. It's not written on paper. It's written within us. That is good news. That the Torah can be written within us because the Mashiach made it possible when he provided the blood to ratify the covenant. This is the renewed covenant in my blood. So to return to our theme, Abraham's faith is that doctrine and manner of life which we are taught in the Torah. It teaches us that humanity requires to be reconciled to the God whom we offended and whose law we broke in Gan Eden. It tells us that we may choose to do good or to do evil. That we have a tendency to the evil inclination because our first parents received the desire to cooperate with it into themselves and pass it on to us. And as a result, death came and passed to us also because all of us sinned. Most of us, most of all, the Torah tells us that only Hashem, you see, listen to what the Torah tells us. Only Hashem can provide atonement and forgiveness. And that he does. And it tells us that there are commandments which those who desire to be forgiven must live in. That's all good news. That is Abraham's faith, and anything else is not. He paved a path for his descendants to walk in, and we are still walking in it thousands of years after him. Our numbers are small. It would be easy for us to compromise the truth. We could go back to the days when we had large numbers and a mixed multitude, each defining the faith of Avraham according to their own agenda and their own thinking. We will not go back to that place. If Hashem desires to add to our numbers, then he will add to our numbers. We will not go back to that place where the truth is whatever you want it to be. Because having seen the truth, we will stand with it. This Sedra from Bereshit, chapter 12 to chapter 17, comprises the Abrahamic covenant. In Hebrew, we refer to it as Brit Ben Ha-Betarim. Brit Ben Ha-Betarim. Literally, the covenant between the parts. Because in chapter 15, it is recorded that in order to ratify it, establish it, Avraham was required to lie between the carcasses of the animals he was to sacrifice to Hashem. It is the principle, you see, that no covenant in the Scriptures can be established without the shedding of blood in sacrifice. That is what Messiah Yeshua was referring to when on Seder night he lifted the cup and said, "This is the renewed covenant in my blood. It is ratified in my blood." How is it possible that Hashem, the God of our fathers, can write the Torah within us? It is possible because the Mashiach provided the blood. So we refer to this Abrahamic covenant as the Brit Ben HaBetarim, the covenant between the parts. However, we have an interesting side issue with this covenant. It did not involve only one human participant. As we noted last week, we were introduced to 3 of the 4 people whose lives began to reverse the sin of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden: Noah, Avraham, and Sarah. Enoch, we already met, and he was the 4th. Like Adam Harishon, the first Adam, and Chava, Hashem dealt with Avraham and Sarah as a couple. Isn't that interesting? There are 4 individuals signified in the Torah, in the early chapters of the Torah, who will have a significant impact upon our world and upon the community of faith. Not one of them was born Jewish. But of the 4, the last 2, a man and his wife, became the father and mother of the Jewish people. Hashem dealt with them as a couple. Adam and Chava were created to be the visible image of the invisible God, because he made humanity male and female. So his image is only recreated when one man and one woman come together in the covenant of marriage. That is why we are duty bound to stand against, to resist this government's decision, both in Westminster and in Edinburgh. This government's decision to introduce same-sex marriage. It is an attack on the image of God. Well, I know that there are many groups in this country who are exercised on the issue. The Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the Muslims. I'm not exercised on the matter on the same basis as they are. How other people conduct their lives is not my business. But this legislation is not an attack on the institution of marriage, as has been claimed by the Catholic and Protestant churches. It's got nothing to do with marriage. It's an attack on the image of God. That is our business. It is uniquely the business of the Jewish people. And I shall tell you why. It is uniquely the business of the Jewish people. Adam and Chava allowed that image, the image of God, to be disfigured. And now, in Avraham and Sarah, Hashem would create a nation which would recreate his image. A people who would live before him in truth. That is what the nation and the faith of Avraham is about. Recreating the image of the invisible God. That is why the issue of same-sex marriage is uniquely the business of the Jewish people. When people ask us, as they do in that usually sickly, sweet tone of voice which they adopt, are you born again? When they ask us, are you born again? They fail to understand or to grasp the magnitude of Hashem's purpose in forming the Jewish people. We are not about praying a prayer and repenting once in our lives and then doing our own thing. You see the picture, brothers and sisters? That's not what we're about. Praying the prayer. I think I've told you before about the man one evening, the man who prayed the prayer. This man, in the particular instance I'm thinking about, this man was off his head on alcohol. Right? You could have told him to climb to the top of the Kingston Bridge and throw himself off, and he would have done it. But there we were, and this nice little, are you born again type person had hold of him. And she announced, he's prayed the prayer. Oh, he's prayed the prayer. And the man said to me, I just prayed the prayer to get rid of her. Quite understood. I had to pray the prayer too. We're not about praying a prayer and then going off and doing our own thing. And that's the hallmark of that movement which claims to have it all sussed. You see, they've got God sussed these people. They've got it sussed. You've got to pray the prayer. You've got to get born again. You don't understand what born again is about. But you've got to get it. And then you can go and do your own thing. You can eat chametz and Pesach. You can put your tzitzit up wherever you fancy putting them, because it doesn't really matter. You can do what you like, so long as we're happy and you know it. You can believe in circumcision and you don't have to, and it doesn't matter. Let's all get together, sing a few songs. We'll do it on a Saturday. We'll have church on a Saturday. But we're all born again. Everyone's born again now. I early on in my life grew suspicious of that term, born again, when I discovered Jimmy Carter was born again. Elvis Presley was born again. The Queen Mother was born again. I started to realise everyone famous was born again. No matter how righteous we may seek to be, we're not about doing our own thing. That is not being born again. Being born again is rediscovering one's true identity as the image of the invisible God. Let's get this straight. Yeshua's conversation with Rabbi Nicodemus in Yochanan chapter 3 was not about personal salvation. Many times have we all heard sermons preached about that big thick old Jew, Nicodemus, who couldn't understand what the Saviour was saying. Just makes you want to. Let's not go there. There's nothing thick about him. Thickos are the ones who are accusing him of being thick. Yeshua tells us he wasn't thick. He says, "Are you the teacher of Israel? Come on, that demon. Are you the teacher of Israel and you're telling me you don't understand these things?" Here are two Jews talking. Not just two Jews, two rabbis. They were doing what we might call the rabbinical dance. Every word was weighed up. That demon was the head of the Pharisaical party in the Sanhedrin. He knew how to weigh everything up, as Devarim 1 verses 16 and 17 instructs him. Weigh up every word. Every word he utters to Yeshua is significant and heavily weighted with meaning. Notice how he starts, Rabbi. We know that you are a teacher come from God. For no man can do these signs, these miracles that you do. There were lots of rabbis doing miracles in the first century. So it wasn't just the fact that Yeshua did miracles that was significant. It was the nature of the miracles he did. The miracles they were expecting the Mashiach to do. No man can do these miracles that you do except God is with him. Yeshua's response is just as heavily weighted and laden with meaning. Understand this, demon. You must be born from above. This wasn't about personal salvation. This was about destiny. And they both understood it. Anyway, I didn't come to expound on Yochanan 3, but I wish I had. I shall do some other time. Rediscovering one's true identity as the image of the invisible God can only be truly achieved in living the Torah. Do you get that? When you come to shul and the rabbi's up there and he's telling you, live the Torah, and you're not living the Torah, and you think, I wish he would shut up. Brothers and sisters, this isn't about getting you to do the Torah. This is about enabling you to discover your true identity as the visible image of the invisible God. It can only be achieved by living the Torah. When the Torah is within you, saturating you, occupying your thinking, dictating your actions and your words and your thoughts. You say, why is the rabbi so down on listening to Christian teachers and listening to this, that and the other on the... Why does he think it's only him who has the truth? That's not the issue, brothers and sisters. Why is the rabbi so down when you listen to Christian teachers? Very simply, God is. Yeshayahu, the prophet Yeshayahu, chapter 8, verse 20. If they speak not according to the Torah and the testimony, they don't have any light. You're wasting your time. They bring confusion. We were discussing that the other night at Shmuel and Johannes a little about the future times and barcodes and chips and yes. Well, why do people get all caught up with that? They get caught up with that because they don't understand Torah. When people leave the Torah because they want to pursue their own agenda, because they want to live in relationships God is against, because it's too Jewish for them. Go figure that. How many times over the years have we heard that? I'm not coming back, it's too Jewish. Beit, Rehovot. Synagogue. HV. There they were, they thought they were coming to the patriarca. Maybe we could have thrown in a little of Islam into the mix, a wee bit of the Pentecostal, and a wee bit of the Baptists, and a wee bit of the Presbyterians, and maybe something from the Mass. Well, I'm not going back there. He was becoming too Jewish. How can a Jew become too Jewish? They make up all sorts of excuses. We are to blame. They love us, but they can't agree with us in just this one little thing. Or they have seen the light, and that rabbi down there is just an ogre. He's just a monster, a dictator. But whatever they say, the truth is, when someone leaves the Torah, they leave what being born again is really about. And they're often too full of pride to realize it. So the next time one of them says to you, "And are you born again?" just say, "And are you?" Do you live the Torah? Avraham needed Sarah. And we have this interesting little matter of Pharaoh taking her to be his wife. We see Avraham Avinu falter in trust. He asks that she should help him ensure his own safety by deceiving Pharaoh, by saying that she is merely his sister. It was half true. In fact, he proposes two things. He says that the Egyptians will be good to him because of her, if they think that they are brother and sister. And indeed this happened. But he also said that they would spare his life and not kill him in order to have her. Interestingly, there is no mention of this afterwards at all. Instead, we discover that when Pharaoh is afflicted, he instantly knows that Abraham is the cause. And he accuses him. How did he know? This affliction covered the whole land. Not just Pharaoh, and yet he knew. Instantly he knew Abraham was the cause. It seems that on this occasion, as on others, Sarah did not agree with Abraham's decision. And so she told Pharaoh the truth. He chose to believe Abraham until Hashem afflicted him, and he had no choice but to conclude that Sarah was correct. The Chazal, the sages, understood this. They noted that as Abraham requested that Sarah marry Pharaoh, so she requested that he take Hagar, whom they identify as Pharaoh's daughter. So the story of Hagar and her offspring is a mirror of the story of Sarah. Both women produced offspring who would war against one another over the same covenant promise. And that included 430 years of exile and eventual slavery in the homeland of Hagar for Yitzhak's descendants. I hope that by now you're beginning to see that in these early chapters of the Torah is being laid a foundation for everything which comes afterwards, even to the present day, because we are inheritors of this ancient and eternal faith. It has come to us through the son of promise, Yitzhak, and through his descendant physically, Mashiach Yeshua. Through Yeshua, we can choose to live it, keep it, defend, and preach it. This is good news to the world, to Israel, and to the nations. It is the life our father Avraham lived, that to which Hashem called him from Ur, and it is a life to which he has called us urgently and emphatically in our day. Get you out. Go. So we came. And we are still journeying until the Mashiach appears and we again inherit the land that our fathers possessed eternally. Will you go with me? Stand with me. Strive with me until he appears. Hashem Yeshua. Amen. That Haran, the brother of Avraham, was deeply involved in the cult of the moon, in which fire was used. There was a confrontation between him and Avraham, and fire fell from heaven, but did not hurt Avraham. Instead, Haran died. Whatever the truth or otherwise of the story, immediately Terach died. Hashem spoke sharply to Avraham, "You, get out, go." As we began to explore last week, this is the start of a new phase in the war between Hashem and the adversary. The war began in Gan Eden, and in fact, it will end there too. I'd like to think with you today on the issue which forms the basis of our Parashat. Lech, Lecha, get you out, go. The journey commenced in an urgent call to leave the land of Abraham's birth and the family which had been his refuge. The urgency was only extenuated by the fact that Terach, Abraham's father, had delayed the departure by settling in Haran. Interestingly enough, the word Haran appears 3 times in the final verses of the previous Sedra. Once it is spelled Haran. The narrative of Abraham's life is the narrative of our lives too. We are here to fulfill a common purpose. The foundation and pattern of which was laid in Avraham Avinu, Avraham our father. Thus Hashem says in Bereshit 18, verse 19, "For I know him," that is Avraham, "that he will command his children and his household after him, that they should observe the way of God to perform righteousness and justice." This is the faith of Avraham. When the followers of Mashiach Yeshua, especially Rabbi Shaul, wrote of the faith of Avraham, they were not writing about some hidden faith. It began with idol worship, the worship of self. And idolatry has been the issue between Hashem, the God of heaven, and humanity ever since. In Bereshit Rabbah 46, Rav Pinchas said, in the name of Rav Hoshea the Great, that the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Avraham, "Go and pave a path for your descendants." You find that everything that is written concerning Avraham is also written about his descendants. When we consider the story of Avraham and the story of Israel in the Torah, we understand that Rav Hoshea is correct. In other words, which is the name of Lot's father, and twice Haran, the city in which Terach settled. We read in the last verse of the previous Sedra that Terach died in Haran. These are not Hebrew words, but their meanings are interesting. Haran means high place, whereas Haran means enlightenment. This gives us an indication of what type of place Haran was. It was a center of occultic worship, a place dedicated to the moon god who was dominant in the area at that time and who eventually metamorphed into the god of Islam. The story is told